Hello everyone, today we're going to be jumping into Standard to play a Simic Agatha's Soul Cauldron deck. So, namesake card and combo piece in this deck is the Soul Cauldron. Now, first and foremost, we get to spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate the abilities of creatures we control. That's a static effect and very strong. And then additionally, creatures with +1/+1 counters on them will have all activated abilities of creatures that are exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So that's also really powerful. As you can imagine, we're stacking activated abilities here. We can also tap the Soul Cauldron to exile a card from a graveyard, and when a creature card is exiled, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control. So notably, this does let us exile a card from a graveyard, so our opponent's graveyard is fair game as well. But we are going to be focusing on our own graveyard here. And there's a couple of things that we want to link together. First and foremost, we have Kami of Whispered Hopes. Now this here is going to have the ability to tap and add X mana of any one color, where X is its power. Notably, that power is going to be a little bit higher if we start putting +1/+1 counters on things, and if we go ahead and start giving this ability to creatures that already have more power. Now this synergizes really well with the new Sleep Cursed Fairy, which has that lovely untap ability there. Now notably, it has a power of 3, so if it has a +1/+1 counter on it, that's a power of 4. And if it has 4 power and the ability to tap for 4 mana and untap for 2 mana, well, lo and behold, we have just created infinite mana, which is very strong for us. Now, how do we want to close out this game with infinite mana? Well, we've got our Realm Scorcher, a Hellkite here, which has Bargain, which we don't particularly care about, but we do care about the fact that for 2 mana, 1 in a red, we can go ahead and deal 1 damage to any target. So infinite mana equals infinite damage with this guy's ability. Now, additionally, to help us find everything we need, we've got Patchwork Crawler. This has the ability to put +1/+1 counters on itself and gain the abilities of creatures it exiles. So this is just a great redundancy if we don't find our Soul Cauldron. And we also have Rona here. With this tap ability, we can actually tap and untap with Sleep Cursed Fairy and cycle through our entire deck until we find exactly what we need. Now, the rest of our deck is just utility to help with the combo. So Wrenn and Realmbreaker. That plus ability gives us a hexproof creature, which could help us combo off. We can also mill and grab a permanent from those milled cards, which is also powerful for finding what we need here. Teaching of the Kirin. This is going to start by milling us, give us a creature. It'll put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, so again, synergy with those +1/+1 counters. And then it'll give us a new creature when it flips at the end. Seed of Hope lets us mill 2 cards and grab a permanent. It's also a little bit of life gain, so this will help us into those mono red decks and those aggro decks. Witness Protection, just to get rid of pesky creatures our opponent has, because we don't want to deal with those. Now we have the Archaeologist here, which is probably one of the more powerful cards in this deck, where we get to mill 3 cards, and then we can put a non-creature, non-land card from those milled cards into our hand. So this is another way to find our Cauldron. But if we don't, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, which also synergizes well with us wanting to have those +1/+1 counters to steal those activated abilities. So that's pretty much how this deck goes. The land base is fairly straightforward. We have 1 copy of Mishra's Foundry. And why is that? Because we can turn it into a creature. And as long as we have a protected creature, we're going to be able to combo. Now, I definitely wouldn't say that this is a tier 1 deck, but this is a very powerful deck that can surprise our opponents with a combo win. That's going to be pretty fun to play. Now, if you guys have been enjoying my content, make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on my latest videos. And if you do enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like. Let's go ahead and see how this deck does. Alright, here we are on the play, and this looks really good to me, so we're going to go ahead and keep. We have that turn 1 fairy, we've got the Soul Cauldron in our hand as well. Things are looking really good. Let's start by playing out our Sleep Cursed Fairy, start getting rid of those stun counters. And of course, Ward 2 on this creature is absolutely insane. It's going to protect us from some of our opponent's removal. I think what we're going to do here is play out a second fairy and then hold up Seed of Hope as an instant. This gives us now 2 options for our creature. So now we just want to get the rest of our combo pieces in the graveyard. We're going to be focusing on some self-mill here. Now if our opponent doesn't play a second land, that's also going to bode really well for us. Nope, they do. But they don't do anything with it, so let's go Seed of Hope. They make a knight, that's fine. We're gonna grab the Archaeologist. And then I think here... Do we want to play out Ren? No, I think we're gonna wait a turn. We're gonna play out our Archaeologist first. Just hitting a bunch of lands, so we get that +1/+1 counter, and then we'll end the turn here. We have Witness Protection, if we need it. Alrighty. And so we can block one of these creatures. Opponent can't really attack here. Adeline is going to turn into a Protected Witness. I think they're going to leave. Nope, they're going to attack with the Officer, so we go ahead and get rid of that. Let's go here. Turn her into a 1/1. We're going to pay for the Ren. Let's mill. I'm gonna grab Rona here. Drawing and discarding is gonna help us out a good deal. And we really just kind of want to get the Kami in our graveyard. I think next turn, what I'm gonna do is go for the Soul Cauldron and exile Rona, the one that's in our graveyard, so we can give that ability to our +1/+1 counter creatures. Then go ahead and put a counter on our Sleep Cursed Fairy. Opponent can kill Ren and Realmbreaker here. Alright. Coppercoat Vanguard. Yep, they're thinking about attacks. Almost certainly they're going to go ahead and kill the Ren here. If we have to pick a block, we're going to block that human token and kill it. Or we'll block to keep Ren and Realmbreaker alive. Either of these is an option. Both save us some health. Yep, he'll have to double attack. Yep. So now we just kill that token. We knew that we were gonna lose Ren there.
Claws at my mind.
Right. Some nice convoking. Fortunately for us, our opponent's hand is empty. And we just need to get some creatures in our graveyard, so that's what Rona's going to help us with a whole bunch, and what our Soul Cauldron is also going to help us with. See, they're still thinking about the creatures they want. Alright, so we find Kami here. Let's go Soul Cauldron. We're gonna pick our graveyard. Exile Rona. Put a +1/+1 counter here. So now we're gonna go ahead, tap. Discard our Kami. And honestly, I think we just Wit Protectness on the Vanguard there. End the turn. And then next turn we'll have the win. Yeah, an opponent needed to draw a removal spell. Or else I think we've got it. Okay. Yep, another Vanguard. We'll block this guy. Largest threat. Go down to 7. And now we'll go ahead and go to our graveyard, and we're going to exile this Kami. Gonna put a +1/+1 counter on that Sleep Cursed Fae as well. And then we'll add some mana. We'll just pick blue. At this point, we've secured the win. So we're just going to add a ton of mana. We'll leave one of them untapped, just in case we mess up somewhere along the lines here. I'm just going to keep on adding mana for a little bit. And then we'll use that mana to continually untapping our fairy as we start cycling through Verona. And then from there, we will eventually find the card we need to close out the game. So this is just a matter of time now. Untap. Alright, let's start filtering through, drawing and discarding. Untap. Draw and discard. Untap. Draw and discard. We'll play out the Foundry. Draw and discard. Can throw you in the graveyard. Draw and discard. We only have a 1 copy of the spell that's going to get us out of here, so we do have to find that. Add a little bit more mana. Discard. Slow and steady, gonna get there. Back to adding our mana. How many cards do we have left? Only 26 cards left in our library. It's going to be one of those, and we will find it eventually. Back to adding some more mana. I think our opponent is just waiting to see a win condition, and we've found it. Now, notably, we cannot actually discard that here, so we do have to discard this. Add red. It doesn't really matter what colored mana we add, because we can pay any colored mana to activate abilities. But now we're definitely getting there. Alright, let's start activating this ability. At this point, our opponent should know that we've won the game. Back to adding some more mana, because we're not quite there yet. Starting to run out of time. So just remember, hardest part about this deck is going to be the clock. That being said, there's no timing restriction on these abilities, so we can just do this during our opponent's turn as well. And we've got it. Alright. Got our opponent going first, but we can keep this starting hand. We've got Cauldron and we've got Fairy, so both of those are good. We're not really going to be able to do much with the Wrenn and Realm Breaker, but I think we're off to a good start. So let's just play that Fairy now. Let's go Archaeologist. Let's see what we find. Two options here. Do we want more mill, or do we want a little bit of life gain here? I think we're going to take the more mill option. Of course, we need a green land before we can play that. Topiary Stomper, sure. So we're playing up against one of those domain piles, most likely. We find our green land, never punished for anything ever. Let's go mill. Make a creature, you can be a 1/1. This seems pretty good for now. And we could have saved that knowing that our opponent likely has bigger threats in their deck, but I think we're in an aggressive enough position where that doesn't matter. Yep. We just block. That goes to the graveyard. Not an issue. And they find a green land. +1/+1 counter. Alright, so what do we've got here? Nothing to super worry about. I think we're gonna go Patchwork Crawler. Soul Cauldron. And end the turn here. So what we really need is to get either Kami to die or the Fairy to die. Stomper, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead, exile that out of their graveyard. Put another +1/+1 counter on the fairy. Get a creature back. Play another land. Attack for 5. End the turn. We're going to be on a beatdown plan. I have no issue blocking with the Kami if we have to. Plains tapped, yep. We'll just let that through. We could have blocked with the Sleep Cursed Fairy, but it's alright. Going back to our graveyard, let's get rid of the Crawler. Go ahead, put another +1/+1 counters on the Sleep Cursed Fairy. Now let's see, what else do we have for creatures? Let's go here. Where are you at? There you are. 2 more +1/+1 counters. Go ahead, deal 9 damage. Ren and Realm Breaker. Minus you.
If this is my final nature,
Grab you.
not abandoned me.
Play out Teachings. We've now got Rona in our graveyard. Leyline Binding, gonna hit the Soul Cauldron or the Sleep Cursed Fairy. Sleep Cursed Fairy. So now we no longer have that untap ability. Leyline Binding gonna hit the Soul Cauldron as well. I mean, do we want to block here? Probably. Keep Ren and Realmbreaker. +1/+1 counter. Let's throw that on the Kami. That's extra mana for us. We're gonna get rid of Ren here.
Of all things draws near. I see endless
Archaeologist.
and
Play out the
reverse.
Archaeologist. Now let's go Soul Cauldron. What do we want to exile here? We're going to exile Kami. It's going to let us add mana with all of our creatures. Tap down the Kami for another Ren and Realmbreaker. Minus.
I will give you all the time I can muster. Search past the walls of this realm.
Teachings. Go ahead, do this. And then from here we can end our turn. Atraxa. Alright, so what we really want is a Sleep Cursed Fairy in the graveyard, giving us that untap ability. And then with our Patchwork Crawler, we can exile Rona, and then we should be able to win from there. So we're all about maximizing our chance of getting that Sleep Cursed Fairy. So we'll double block like this so we can minus on Ren. I don't care about the 1 poison counter. See where to put the +1/+1 counters. Let's go ahead and put it on the Patchwork Crawler. Okay. Hit the fairy, maybe? No.
Nature.
Well, we get
has
Witness
not
Protection, though.
abandoned me.
Witness Protection, gonna go there. And let's see. Here, we'll go to our graveyard. Let's exile the Rona. And we'll end our turn here. We've now got draw and discard options among all of our creatures here. I don't know if we're looking at a board wipe. I want to keep Atraxa out of their graveyard, though. So we'll just take the one here. Maybe they will Sunfall. Maybe they won't. Alright, so they're going to go ahead and kill some creatures. So let's go ahead, draw and discard. Discard that. Let's spend some mana, exile a creature from our graveyard. We'll exile this Patchwork Crawler. We'll get some +1/+1 counters, so it'll survive. That has Summoning Sickness, so we don't have to worry about that. That'll just die. But we keep our Patchwork Crawler. Opponent has to use Go for the Throat to kill this, and that's fine. Into the graveyard you go. Or into exile. Goes the other card. And then before we go to my turn, let's draw and discard. We'll discard you. Discard you. So as it currently stands, let's see if we can go ahead and get our fairy in the graveyard. Seed of Hope. We do. Gonna not grab the fairy here. We'll grab our Soul Cauldron, so we have it in hand. Now let's go ahead and go to our graveyard, find our Sleep Cursed Fairy. Where are you at? There you are. Put that there. So now we almost have lethal on our opponent. It's one more turn. We have infinite mana. We've got card draw. But we do not have our finisher because we've got the Realm Scorcher Hellkite in the graveyard. And the only way to go ahead and get that is going to be to wait for our next turn. So we'll end here. We'll pass. We'll see what our opponent does. Again, I'm not thinking we're going to see a board wipe here. I think they're just going to play out Atraxa again. And replace their old Atraxa. Which is going to put us in a fine spot. Okay, even better. We'll double block. And let's do some drawing and discarding for free while we can. Almost out of cards. We can get rid of that Soul Cauldron. Do it one more time. Again, only 8 cards left here. Discard that Soul Cauldron. So now let's go to our graveyard and finish this up. Grab you. We're going to put our counters on the Kami. And now let's go ahead, add a bunch of mana. Untap it. Add a bunch of mana. Untap it. And it looks like we've got it. Add a bunch of mana. Untap. Add a bunch of mana. Once again, untap. More mana. We're just gonna keep doing this for a little bit. Keep in mind, it's 2 mana for 1 damage, so we're gonna need double 18 in terms of mana before we can win. Yep, opponent's thinking about what to do, but again, we see almost every card in their hand. Perfect. And we'll just activate here. At this point, we've got the game. Just start doing damage, see if our opponent wants to concede before we do all the clicks. Alright. Looks like opponent didn't want to concede early, so we'll just add a little bit more mana. Get ourselves back up to that 18 mana that we're going to need to close this out. And let's finish the game. Now, notably, even if our opponent had some form of instant speed interaction, we would just do all of this over again to add that mana in response to their instance. So there is not really any way that that one card would impact us winning. And final damage. Good game. Ah, gaining 3 life. That's fine. See, notably, we're just going to go ahead and add some more mana and deal 1 damage in response. Doesn't matter. Alright, so as you saw, this deck is actually a pretty good combo deck. And as an added bonus, with Soul Cauldron, being able to put +1/+1 counters on things, and Kami putting more +1/+1 counters on things, you can actually just kind of funnel a Sleep Cursed Fairy to deal that damage for you at the end of the game if you can't combo off either. That being said, as we saw, this deck is definitely click intensive. So if you don't want to be clicking a whole bunch and executing that combo, right, this is not going to be the deck for you. But it still has that strong win potential. This is definitely a deck that I'd recommend playing in paper. It's going to be so much easier to demonstrate to your opponent that you've got that infinite mana loop. And then at that point, again, some of our longer and more difficult wins, what you would do at that point is you would start tapping, untapping, and you'd say you have infinite mana. You'd have Rona's ability. You'd say, I'm going to discard and draw until you find your thing, and then you do that. And then you finally get your Hellkite, you play it out, and do all of your stuff from there as well. So pretty powerful. Now, I would also say definitely don't underestimate the Patchwork Crawler. One of the big weaknesses of this deck is that you can only really activate the Soul Cauldron once per turn, because you're looking at a legendary artifact here, right? We don't have any ways of untapping it in this deck. And if we do accidentally end up putting one of our combo pieces in the graveyard on the turn that we want to combo off, we do run into a slight issue there. So we definitely want to have a way to get more than one creature's ability out onto another creature during our turn, and a Patchwork Crawler is a great way to do that. So I definitely recommend including at least a couple copies of that card. But yeah, aside from that, this deck is pretty good. Again, lots of clicks. Make sure you're ready for that. But overall, it's going to do a pretty good job for you. So now I hope you guys all enjoyed. If you did like this video, make sure you hit the like button down below. And if you have any ideas for another deck you'd like to see me play, why don't you go ahead and let me know in a comment. I'm going to go ahead and see you all next time.